This is a leaked recording of Amazon's union-busting trading video. And I thought it might be nice for us to go over this so we can see what kind of extensive class consciousness wealthy people have adopted, the extent to which they're willing to defend their interests. Some of you may have seen this before, but it would be nice to talk about it anyway. Bleh. Oh. I saw a reflection of red in the fucking tissue paper. It got me panicking for a second that my nose is bleeding or whatever. Huh.
Welcome. We're excited to have you at this training, specifically designed to give you the tools that you need for success when it comes to labor organizing.
Pump it.
During this course, we'll cover several important topics, such as our position on unions, associate rights, signs of employee disengagement, and how to identify, escalate, and address associate concerns. We're
associate engagement. That one's a little weird. Yeah, I can pump it even further if I must. There. That's nice and loud.
We're not anti-union, but we are not neutral either.
What? Are you pro-union? What?
We will boldly defend our direct relationship with associates as best for the associate, the business, and our shareholders.
Okay, as best for the business, the associate, and our shareholders. So, we're not anti-union, but we're not neutral, but we're defending direct association. So you're anti-union. Okay, weird little propaganda piece directly lying up front. So what's best for our employees, our business, and our stockholders? I appreciate them admitting up front that their stockholders are one of the beneficiaries of their policy on unions.
We do not believe unions are in the best interest of our customers, our shareholders, or most importantly, our associates.
Remember, by the way, that unions are nothing more than free association of workers coming together to negotiate for their own rights. So if you don't believe that it's in their best interest to form a union, that's cool. That's not up to you. It's their decision whether they want to form a union. That's like saying you don't believe it's in the associate's best interest for them to spend their paycheck on, say, a new car, so you're not going to let them. That's not up to you, my duderino. That doesn't have anything to do with you. If they want to represent themselves through a union, that's their legal right.
Our business model is built upon speed, innovation, and customer obsession.
Customer obsession? What the fuck does that mean? That's kind of fucking weird.
Things that are generally not associated with unions.
What? Wait. There is absolutely no information to indicate that unions inhibit speed, innovation, or customer obsession. Whatever the fuck that means. Okay. So, again, this is a complete misdirection. Like, actually, we don't like unions because we here at Amazon value clean air and we like lunch breaks. And unions aren't typically associated with, I don't know what the fuck that means. They don't hurt it in any way. It doesn't really matter if unions are associated with it if it doesn't impede those things.
When we lose sight of those critical focus areas, we jeopardize everyone's job security. We don't
jeopardize everyone's job security. So what that actually means, if you funnel out the corporate speak, is if we don't focus very hard on these characteristics, then you will lose your jobs because we will fire you because we aren't making as money. Very weird how they would just say, you know, if we lose focus on these things, we'll fire you. You can just say that rather than job security. Job security will be fine if unions exist. Again, it's all about creating that chain of associations. So the statement here that they are avoiding making is unions hurt the business. That's what they're avoiding saying. They're using a bunch of fucking jigsaw puzzle words to get around it. So instead of unions hurt the business, it's, well, we value these characteristics, and these characteristics are not typically associated with unions, and if these characteristics are not focused on, then job security might be. It's like this weird esoteric, like 14 layers of abstraction before you get to the actual argument. Funnily enough, the exact same way that Steven Crowder dishonestly reframes the arguments of the people he talks to.
Mouth unions in general, but we will speak openly with associates about unions, including any specific concerns about particular unions involved in organizing.
So you're not neutral, but you're not anti-union. Again, like this is a linguistic impossibility unless they're pro. Oh, sorry. So here are two boxes. One called neutral and one called anti-union, and they are apparently neither of these things. This is a logical impossibility unless you are in fact pro-union.
About unions, including any specific concerns about particular unions involved in organizing. And we share our preference for a direct working relationship frequently and boldly.
Yeah, so you're anti-union. Again, never trust an organization that has to lie to you like this. If they just said openly, we're anti-union because we don't think it represents the interests of our stockholders, at least they'd be honest with that. For those of you who don't know, unions get kind of a bad rap in this country because they've been associated with some shit. But more importantly than that, they've been like the subjects of a century of anti-union propaganda. More than a century, actually, come to think of it. Since time immemorial, my friends, capitalists have done everything in their power to squeeze as much blood out of their workers as possible. And everything that we enjoy today in work, that may be paid vacation, sick days, the 5-hour workday, overtime pay, all of these things are products of people like me, far left pro-worker union advocates, pushing corporations real fucking hard until they caved. And the way they were able to do that is through unions. Since back then, since 150 years ago, and times even before that, always has the businessman said, we could stop employing children and paying them a pittance, but how are we supposed to survive? Our business can't stand up to that kind of government regulation. We could pay people overtime for more than 40 hours of work, couldn't we? But how is our business supposed to survive? We could make sure that all of our facilities are installed with the basic minimum level of fire preventative, like security equipment necessary to ensure hundreds don't die in a factory fire. But who can afford that expense? This has been like unironically, like for over a century, like every single fucking time. Oh, it's bad for the business, bad for the business. And in spite of that, union workers have pushed on in solidarity to give everyone, all workers, not just those in unions, better rights, better living conditions, better pay. So unions are good because they help you negotiate with the businesses you work under. You as an individual are not capable of negotiating your pay unless you are an extraordinarily talented or special case. Extraordinarily. So I can give you an example. If you're, for example, an NBA athlete, that's pretty extraordinary, not many of those. If you are a world-renowned neurosurgeon, cool. If you're a professor of philosophy who's known the world around for your insightful these are the kinds of positions where you might have a decent chance at negotiating for pay or negotiating for rights because the business really, really, really wants you in their fold. But for the majority of people, you included, unless you are very special indeed, you are a replaceable cog in a machine designed to make as much money for as many shareholders as possible. And you are interchangeable. You can be replaced with other people who will do your job as well as you, or if they're more desperate, better than you. So you can't negotiate your pay. When was the last time one of you walked into a business that you worked at and went up to the manager and said, "You know what? I work for $9.50 an hour. I think I deserve 12. How's that worked out for you? Any success stories in chat? Y'all know those boomer memes? Maybe you've seen them in like Sunday strips or old comics about the how nerve-wracking it is to go up to your boss and ask for a raise. You know why those are funny to us now? It's because no one does that. Because you'll just be fired. Or they'll just say no. They'll say no, and if your performance slacks afterwards due to lack of motivation, they'll write you up and they'll fire you, and they'll find someone else who's more desperate for work to replace you. This whole meme of like individually negotiating your wages, like get your head out of the fucking clouds. Take your ass out of Fantasyland. No one does this. No one's done this in a really long time. You cannot advocate meaningfully for your own rights as an individual, but a union can. A union can do that for you. And in exchange for union dues, you receive far greater benefits than anything you could get arguing on your own behalf solo. You get far more than you pay the union in dues, I'll tell you that. As long as it's a good union. Vosh, during the Depression, like they were fucking paramilitary socialist groups. Unions in the IWW were super fucking popular. Yup. Literally every workplace I've ever been in, like 10 plus in 4 different states, my coworkers all had extremely negative views of unions. The biggest talking point I said was that unions are full of people that will go into a restroom for 4 hours at a time and not be fired. That unions are full of leeches. Yeah. That whole all unions are union workers are leeches thing, that's really fucking good capitalist propaganda, my duders. Absolutely. Yeah. Did you know that, unions were at their most powerful back in one of the most productive eras of American industrial development, back at the turn of the 20th century? That's when unions were fighting most aggressively for their own rights, and that's when we developed incredibly quickly as a country. Just kind of weird that a period associated with rapid industrial growth would also be associated with the rise in the power of unions. You'd think that if unions were lazy or encouraged laziness in the people who work there, that you would not see those two things correlate, but I don't know. One way or another, if we're talking about raw productivity, it is an empirical fact that job productivity increases when people are happy, well compensated, and socially fulfilled. Unions work to provide those benefits, which means that productivity goes up. But frankly, I don't give a fuck about productivity if it comes at the expense of miserable workers. Even if it came at a cost of productivity, I would advocate for workers. Why the fuck should you, a worker, give a fuck about productivity? So your boss can make more money? How many yachts should the owner of the company you work at get to have before you start to prioritize your happiness over his? I ask you. Let's get back to this shit.
Even when no organizing activity has occurred, you will learn about the warning signs most commonly associated with early union organizing, as well as other warning signs that could indicate associate disengagement, vulnerability to organizing, or early organizing activity.
So not only are you on the lookout for people who are organizing, you're on the lookout for disengagement, which might be a sign of an interest in organizing. Love that class trader shit. Absolutely. How low do you have to be working a shit job for low pay at a fucking Amazon warehouse, and your job is to look at your other workers, and if any of them seem too discontented and want to make their lives better, your job is to report them and have them fired. Report all suspicious activity.
While employees have the right to organize, we have a right and responsibility to share our position that a direct working relationship is better for the customer, the company, and the associate.
Okay, so again, repeating the exact same talking points. While people are, so legally, they can't prevent people from union organizing. It's illegal for them to do that. However, and they just said that, so we don't prevent people from forming unions. We just teach you their warning signs. We just teach you what you can do to spot them before they make any unions and deal with them appropriately there.
In order to be able to do that effectively, it is critical that we recognize the early warning signs of potential organizing and escalate concerns promptly. If you see warning signs of potential organizing, notify your building HRM and GM site leader immediately.
Imagine what a fucking cuck, what an absolute fucking degenerate class traitor cuck you'd have to be to report a coworker for that sort of thing. Fucking imagine. Amazon workers, listen to me. You've been fed You've been fed propaganda, my friends. Unions are fine. Go make a fucking union. You're miserable right now. What do you have to lose? Your job? If you were in a union, that wouldn't be a risk.
HRMs and GM site leaders should notify their assigned ER managers or ER principal immediately. The most obvious signs would include use of words associated with unions or union-led movements like living wage or steward, petitions or other concerted activity such.
Remember, if you hear one of your coworkers talk about wanting to have a living wage, they're reiterating unionist propaganda that must be identified, notified, and dealt with immediately. If you see any of your coworkers expressing a desire to have a living wage, please report them to your local area manager so they can be dealt with appropriately. We are not anti-union, but we are also not anti-union. We are anti-union. If you see anyone talking about how they deserve more than a pittance for their work, working under one of the most successful companies in the history of human civilization, report them to your manager. Cuck. Cucky, cucky, cuck, 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 cuck. Now lick my boot.
Such as an associate purporting to speak on behalf of his or her coworkers when raising concerns. Union
Coworkers coming together to discuss a problem collectively before bringing it to management.
graffiti, union t-shirts, hats, jackets, or other clothing.
Subversive clothing.
Union flyers, and union visitors in or near the parking lot. Some signs are less obvious than finding the actual union flyer, but they can still indicate associate disengagement, which is itself a warning sign for potential organizing.
This video is why it's impossible to take libertarians seriously when they talk about unrestricted government power, but like this right here is unironically thought corporate regulations, because thought policing and totalitarian. And that's not an exaggeration. For once, those terms are not being used hyperbolically. This is literally thought policing. Use of these words associated with unionist propaganda should be noted and reported accordingly to HR. This is actually totalitarian. You are a little tiny peon in a business. Businesses are authoritarian. They're dictatorships. By definition, they are. This is such a phenomenal meme. If there are any libertarian-leaning people in the audience, I ask you, Amazon at this point in time is more wealthy and more powerful than many countries on this planet. If they wanted to devote their wealth towards, like, I don't know, seizing military hardware and like conquering some piece of land out in Africa or something, they could do that. They could form their own little state. They could do that, okay? It's within their power. Hopefully they don't do that, but they could do that. So, how is this better? How is this better? This is worse than anything the government does. And the difference here, the critical difference here, is that the government, generally speaking, its policies, it doesn't really affect your life. It does in a very broad, sort of circumstantial, social way. That absolutely it does. But in like a day-to-day engagement with a social structure kind of way, government tend to stay out of your life. Now, a business, you're there 8 hours a day, buddy, and you are there very expressly at the behest of, to subservience to an authority figure above you. That's 8 hours a day that you are in direct contact with an authoritarian figure. That's some pretty direct engagement. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's if you work no overtime. That's if you can pay for everything with one job.
Examples include associates who normally aren't connected to each other suddenly hanging out together. Associates who were close suddenly stop speaking to each other. Groups of associates scatter when approached by management. Increased associate negativity, anger, or confrontation.
Remember how in 1984, the little fucking kids, the little baby Orwellian kids, were taught to like keep an eye out for odd social behaviors amongst their parents and amongst the people in the social groups they engage with to report to the state. This is literally Listen, spy on your coworkers at all times. If you see people speaking together when they didn't before, note it. If you see people not speaking together when they did before, note it. When you see people being friends, note it. When you see people not being friends, note it. Collect reports, spy, report on your workers. You do not want them talking or thinking about unions, which we're not anti-unions. But we don't want them thinking about it. We don't want anything. We don't want any slogans. We don't want to see people associating or organizing. We don't want to see workers talking with one another as long, whether or not they're on property. If you see any social media posts from these people that indicate pro-union leanings, I want you to note those as well. We need to build binders on these people. We need to make them easy to fire and replace. This is literally cult behavior. It's literally like totalitarian. It's literally Orwellian. It's like a little police state, little thought crimey police state. And it's happening today, right now, at Amazon, a company that people use and praise day by day in this country and in others. A company which has a spackly clean public image, which it uses to worm its way into our lives, every facet of our lives, relentlessly. And all they take in exchange for their incredible power and prestige is the lives and the happiness and the freedom of the people who work there.
Unusual complaints or change in passion or detail around complaints. Unusual interest in policies, benefits, employee lists, or other company information, or any other associate behavior that is out of character. For example, an associate who normally leaves promptly begins hanging out in the break room for an hour after work each day. In order to recognize warning signs, it is critical that you know what an associate's normal behavior looks like. Often, it is the change in behavior that is the warning sign, more than the actual behavior itself.
So that's a good ass meme right there, my friends.